welcome to the Mobile Gaming Today panel. My name is Ted Veroni. I'm head of business development for WAP here. Just very briefly, what we are, we're an AI company. We offer an intelligent revenue management platform that allows us to predict, understand player behavior. That then, and then on top of that, we have a couple closed loop, automation solutions. So loyalty program, get people come back more often, some more time in your game, combined with IAP pricing optimization. So simply put, we try to help game developers make more money outside the gameplay. So, and clearly, mobile gaming today, it's a big business, right? It's generating $70 billion in revenue. It's growing now with COVID-19. We're seeing greater usage and growth. We're going to talk about that too. But we also want to talk about how can game makers, given what a large and competitive market is, how they can stand up in the crowd and not only to acquire players, but then also retain them longer and improve monetization. And we do that from the point of view of talking about what's going on today and sort of trends and sharing insights. So with that, we're pretty lucky to have a great group of panelists. I'll let each one of you, if you could just please just introduce yourself and briefly and your company. So I guess left to right from where I'm looking, Vlad.
Hi everyone, my name is Vlad. I'm the founder and CEO of Crave Mobile. We're a game developer and publisher based in Estonia with a large office in Russia, in St. Petersburg. And we've been around publishing mobile games for the last 10 and a half years.
Pete?
Hi, I'm Pete. I'm a director of user acquisition with Jam City. Jam City is a mobile developer and publisher of games. Some of our hit titles include Cookie Jam and the Harry Potter franchises.
Hello, Brock.
Hello, hey. So I'm Barak. I'm CEO of Murka, a European social casino gaming company that recently was acquired by Blackstone.
Cool. Okay, so just get right into it. So today's conversation, mobile gaming today, I think we'd certainly be remiss if, in fact, it's just impossible not to talk about, COVID-19 if, we're talking about how it's impacted mobile games today. So last few months, seen of course, a lot of time on our hands to play games, and we're seeing that in terms of, usage, downloads, and revenue. So maybe Brock, just starting with you, right to left, is, what effect has the pandemic had on app monetization from your perspective?
Well, I think it's not a secret that there was a boom in the beginning of March that stayed with us for, let's say, 3-4 months. We can see that the ARPDAU and all the other metrics, if we are talking about time in the game, sessions, spent by paying user, everything was extremely high in this period. And I can say it's kind of natural from the point that I see it. So people are staying at home. In the beginning, it was very shock. No, it's only 5 months, 6 months ago, but it looks like period ago. So people was in shock. People was at home playing a lot, I can say. And right now that we are kind of post it, we can see that some of this growth is still with us and some of it is already gone, unfortunately.
Yeah. So just a little brief blurb, but kind of maybe dissipating, going away. So interesting. So what about Pete? Anything, seeing the same thing? Anything different from Jam City perspective?
When we look at sort of like the app monetization or engagement trends, our games are pretty sticky. So it's sort of hard to pinpoint things to COVID. Didn't really notice like too much difference in sort of like the day-to-day metric, but where we really saw the boost, and this is from a marketer's perspective, is sort of the declining CPM in market prices, which really presented, for us, performance marketing opportunities. So we saw many of the brand advertisers sort of pulling out, especially during the early times of the pandemic, which really created some good momentum for us in the company. Of course, we also saw, as you alluded to, increased organic volume, organic downloads. So that was also a boon.
CPM still decline down low to kind of where you can take advantage of it, or are they kind of risen back up to where, people coming back in the marketplace?
Yeah, it varies sort of like source to source. Of course, everything's different, and also on the different segments in which you're buying. But we have seen some, I guess, return to normal on a lot of the places where we buy.
Okay. Vlad, you seen the same stuff that we just heard too, or you can talk. I have another question too about player behavior, but I'd like to give you an opportunity if you have anything else to add.
Interestingly, we have different experiences here because in our case, we did not observe a major change in player behavior or app monetization metrics. I mean, we had pretty good March, pretty good April, but it's not something we would have not achieved otherwise with well-targeted campaigns and some nice live events. However, on the marketing side, our life was actually made more difficult by the changes happening around us because it basically forced us to reevaluate all the parameters we had been working with for weeks or months and just increase the workload on the media buyers at a time when we were launching new games. So, we wanted to be in a more stable situation when, bringing new products to the market, but it basically messed up all the settings and we had a slightly different audience composition. So it was quite challenging.
Okay. What about in sticking to player behavior then with that is so a lot of new downloads, new players, it's a challenge too, but how about just from usage? Are people playing your games, the same as they have before, or are they just because all these new players, or they have different sort of profile in how they're playing?
I'm not sure
Anyone?
I will jump. I can say that we saw in that period much more higher engagement. Our old audience and even our new audience was playing more. Basically, the lengths, the number of spins, games, the engagement, so everything grow even dramatically, I can say, especially in Q2. And I think that after the growth, if we are talking about the behavior of the user, so Q3 came, and Q3 is the summer from one hand, and the post-pandemic from the other. So we saw a grow and then a slight decline, but still we can say that the users are still with us, most of them, which create a good engagement this period that they played a lot, but they are just playing a little bit less. So this is what we examined in this period.
Cool. One more kind of COVID. I'm moving on from COVID, but just look, we're all calling in from home or remote, from our offices here too. So I'm just kind of curious, just on the kind of the working from home, has this changed your sort of environment in your office and how you're working, right? Doing a lot. I guess we're all doing. Pete and I in California, we're still kind of in lockdown. I think by the end of the year, but maybe Brock, your perspective from, I think Cyprus, where you're in right now.
So we have 5 offices in Europe. We have and in mid March until I think 2-3 months, everyone worked from home. Like totally, we closed the 5 offices. We have around 600 employees, and we saw surprisingly or not surprisingly increase of efficiency. So people work harder, which I believe connected also to the fact that people didn't have what to do, basically, because everything was locked, and people kind of engage more with the work and felt like they disconnect them. In my personal and also professional opinion, that after a while, few months, it's becoming harder and harder to keep the culture of the company, because in the end of the day, we are in the gaming industry and you need to innovate. And the innovation is not coming even from Zoom discussion. It's coming from people that talking near the coffee or in the lunch break or in the elevator. And it's also, so from one hand, the innovation, from other end, the connection to the company. You don't see the people, you work with them. So it's a little bit got lost. After, I think that somewhere in June, we came back to the office. It's still in capsule. It's not full. But it still have more open atmosphere. And I think it's people missed the working from office in my perspective. I can say that I miss the people. So it was very difficult to work all alone.
Got it. Any Vlad, how about you? How's this impacted game development from your perspective? I know you already have I know you have a studio in St. Petersburg. You're in Estonia yourself, but how's your company adapted to this?
There is so much I have to say about this. I can sit tight for the rest of the interview if you allow me, because it's going to be a long answer. I have to admit, I had been fantasizing about a hybrid model of work for years, because we used to have people working remotely from different places in the world, but in the principal locations in Tallinn, Estonia, and St. Petersburg, the law was always you come to the office. If you are in the city, you come to the office. And that's what we structured our work around. And I was, always thinking about, hey, maybe this is not optimal. Maybe we could move to, Cyprus, for example, for the winter to spice up the experience, and get some sunshine. More on that later. Mm-hmm. The universe is obviously listening and responding in very dramatic ways. So obviously we had to go on lockdown, like everyone else. However, what I found is that as we exited the lockdown in Estonia, in May already, it wasn't, people rushing back to the office. And that was not because of the safety concerns. It was because some really enjoyed staying at home for different reasons. And I ran a bunch of surveys in the Russian office and in the Estonian office, asking people, what's your view on this? Do you want to stay at home? Do you want to come to the office every once in a while? Do you want to work in the office seasonally and then maybe, spend some time, I don't know, in the Mediterranean in the winter, if you were so inclined? And in the end, in both offices, 75 to 80% of people said we want more remote work. Now, obviously, that was in March or April when the situation was quite new. I repeated the same thing a few weeks later. There was no change. And then it dawned upon us that this is probably going to be permanent to some extent. And this is where the fun started, because by law, we have to guarantee that the working conditions are appropriate, that if they're working from home, they get enough sun and they get enough air and the seat is nice. So we had to develop a whole set of rules and regulations and, actually travel to people's homes to make sure that the conditions are there, that they're not interrupted. Then another aspect which we've been facing throughout is the burnout, because as you well know, the boundaries between work and not work are being blurred. So yes, we saw a spike in productivity, but we also saw that people are getting more and more, tired, and you could see that they're enjoying this, but I almost felt that we must be protecting people from themselves throughout this whole change of dynamic. Now it's stabilized a bit. I think we've all adjusted, but one thing that's missing is the social connection. And I've been doing lots of one-on-ones and interviews with people throughout the company routinely, and I hear it from every angle and every corner, and everyone's saying the same thing. We have the best vibe ever, and people are the most engaged ever, and the culture is as pronounced and as vibrant as it can be. But everyone is missing the parties, everyone is missing the fun things we used to do together. And it's somewhat easier in Tallinn, but in Russia, the situation is quite dire currently. And even traveling to the office or to a party is actually dangerous, because everyone's taking the subway in St. Petersburg, and subway is, obviously, especially when it's jam-packed full of people, it's the best way to experience COVID yourself. It's not safe by any measure, unlike in Estonia, where social distancing has been the norm for centuries, literally. So it's quite interesting. We've been in this for months. We've applied different new rules, and we're running lots of events, and we're talking to people and running the surveys. And months in, we're still not sure where we're going to end on the spectrum.
It's constantly moving. It's unprecedented times, right? With COVID, look at my country, So, but and so, well, Pete, we share the same state, where we're just separated by 500 miles, I think, or so. How about you guys, James? I know the rest of the year. I know we work together. You guys are just not planning. Is there any time when you guys are going to be going back, or you guys thought about how is it going to be a hybrid approach? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, it's very fluid. At least for the rest of the year, we'll be staying in the office, and we're really following sort of like the state's directive and on sort of what a appropriate kind of going back to the office sort of looks like. But yeah, kind of echoing, I think Barak's sentiments and Vlad's to a degree, like, for us, similar things, missing the coffee talk, kind of has been one of the challenges for us, particularly in marketing and UA, where we're, constantly sort of like brainstorming, sharing sort of like thoughts, ideas, best practices. We have a fairly large team, and it's not always easy to sort of like, do that and Slack. or in video conferences, especially if like the meetings are very large. So sort of just kind of like making adjustments, to that dynamic has been one of the things that we've been sort of like trying to, account for. So, what we see are, maybe fewer larger meetings and more sort of like impromptu kind of like smaller group discussions, just to kind of help keep the casual sort of conversation going. I think like one of the best meetings we have are sort of like the early sort of stand-up meetings with the immediate team, where it's both sort of like a social and kind of like a work-related discussion, just to kind of help keep the sanity, keep the morale up. Meetings like that, we didn't really have as much before because it was just part of the office dynamic. But now they've sort of folded into more of our day-to-day in the work from home environment.
Okay. Yeah. Well, look, it's good. And imagine, of course, you think about different roles and responsibility. If you're QA, you're engineering, kind of easier to kind of do some by yourself. But like, game design, kind of game development, or even some of the marketing, kind of creative aspects of things too. You really need that opportunity to collaborate too. So, but let's, we could probably keep going on about COVID and everything else. But what, one question I wanted to ask is maybe outside of COVID, what are some of the biggest challenges that are facing developers today? As they, consider, so we can't help it in COVID too. So maybe just, Brock, to hurt me a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's a difficult question because there are many challenges. I think that the main point, it's related and not related, but companies that were working like for a while before COVID have the feeling that they need to create a growth that will be correlated to what was in Q2. And I think it's a big challenge because there is a psychological bias here that after you facing growth, even if you have a drop and you are still above what you had before, it's still very difficult to digest. And my assumption from a business perspective that 2021 will be a difficult year because a company wants to grow, and especially in this industry, and it will be hard. This is one point. And I think that the second point that there is a lot of lights and focus right now on the gaming industry, which means that many competitors, a lot of money is getting into the industry, which create, from one hand, yes, it's good because you have more money, more demand, so you are growing. But from the other hand, it's create more competition. I already read a few articles that talking about the lifetime that becoming shorter, that the user are lost interest very fast. The number of application in our mobile is consistently growing. So I think that if I need like to give the point, the main challenge is to create games that their ROI, let's say, for you as a company or a team, will be fast as possible. And it's kind of obvious, but it's becoming harder and harder day by day because the
competition and everything else. It's Yep.
Exactly.
What about Vlad? What about you? What do you think is the biggest challenge right now facing in mobile gaming today?
I can only add to what Barak said about the perception that because games are being played more, there has to be more and more growth, and then more and more growth, which is not feasible. We had the spike, and it basically passed for most of us. And moreover, the wealth that's being added to the industry by the fact that some people are spending more time playing mobile games is not evenly distributed, and it's not going to be evenly distributed for any reason. It's going to land on the accounts of some elite publishers able to capitalize on that, and maybe some occasional almost random hits and success stories. But I think for the vast majority of the market, it's just going to get tougher and tougher because of that perception and because of the appetites of investors as well. I think we had some kind of, when the pandemic first became an international issue, there was obviously lots of fear, and as a result, some kind of cool down in the investment activity. But now the money has to go somewhere, and gaming is close to the top of the list because of this perception. But this also means not just more money for the companies to work with, but also more pressure on the incumbents. So it's going to be really challenging. But besides that, the way I think about mobile games, especially free-to-play mobile games, every game is basically a startup. So you have the typical set of startup problems. You have to get the team in place, you have to get it funded, you have to stand out, gain visibility, execute on the vision, and so on and so forth. It's really, really complex.
Yeah. When you pointed the human condition, we're only happy if we're growing. So Pete, let me go to you on this too, maybe a little more directed on that too. So, but unless you have anything else, another challenge you want to talk about, I really would like to hear kind of your perspective on, I guess, a great challenge facing the industry right now. And that's certainly with iOS 14 and the deprecation of IDFA and what's going on there, right? With Apple, sort of not allowing sort of that last click attribution from the IDFA. So unless there's anything else you want to add to the other question, but wanted to jump into that if you have any thoughts there, because something close to your day-to-day work, I know.
Yeah, that's certainly true. I guess when you're thinking of sort of just broad challenges, for marketing or for user acquisition right now, it's sort of like the playing field becoming a little bit more level as our marketing platforms become more and more automated, which just means increasing costs and competition. With IDFA deprecation, there's a whole host of sort of like challenges or things we need to figure out in order to continue user acquisition and strive for efficiency. And that's sort of on the strategy, the measurement, and sort of like the back end data pipeline side. Sort of when you think about strategy and removing IDFA, a lot of the channels that we buy on today really look at IDFA as a way to like find the players that resonate with your game. There are a lot of device graphs that are sort of like powering these ad platforms, and with the deprecation of IDFA, those graphs are no longer going to be as efficient or as effective. So how do we sort of roll with that? How do we sort of like continue to get our games in front of the users that are going to resonate with our audiences? Those are places that we're currently exploring and trying to figure out as these privacy changes draw closer. So there's the whole strategy side. Which channels do we think are gonna weather the storm? How do we sort of adjust our strategy with these channels? Then you have the whole measurement piece. So, with IDFA, it's deterministic. We have a pretty solid understanding of sort of like, the return for each of our channels for each of our users. So shifting into sort of a more probabilistic world when it comes to attribution and sort of payback, sort of developing models around that is something that we're thinking about. And then, new data sources, SK ad network, how do we elegantly integrate that, within our existing frameworks? I guess it's sort of the third piece, that we need to consider.
What type of, any insight, anything can share now, maybe, and it's okay if you can't, it's like, because it seems we have to move away from reliance on last click attribution over towards more a holistic kind of, macro view of measurement, right? So I think that's kind of what you're getting at with the sort of probabilistic sort of approach. Any sort of maybe more tactical insights to offer on that, or is that just still part of, you said strategy too, so maybe just an early stage, stuff too?
It certainly is early. We're exploring sort of a few different methods. I can't get into too much of the detail about exactly what we're doing, but it's things that are more like causation.
I get it, competitive advantage. Well, it's fine. So, Vlad, how about anything you want to add to that, too, or?
No, not really. Very well said.
Okay, good. We'll be back to you. So you mentioned measurement stuff too. I'm just kind of curious, your opinion, and because we've been relying on sort of attribution providers, right? Old measurement, folks. And so, is this the end of MMPs? Right? That's kind of what they were sort of that place of truth and sort of independent third party. But with that last click, and you're kind of figuring out your own probabilistic models. Do you even need an MMP?
I mean, it's hard to say. I think it's all to be determined. The MMPs have a history of sort of like rolling with different changes and creating value in different ways. So, I think, what happens with MMPs will be partly contingent on how well sort of an MMP is able to sort of evolve with the times and continue to create services that add value to user acquisition. So while deterministic attribution on iOS is going to be less viable, perhaps there are other sorts of things that an MMP might be able to offer to sort of help with their acquisition efforts.
Makes sense. Yeah. So I mean, I don't want to count them out, right? I'm sure there's some smart people at those companies who are trying to figure out what to do. Hey, they got Android. Barak, how about you? Anything you want to add to what we've just talked
I
about?
can add more in the high level, my perspective. We have a quite high budget of marketing, and I can say that I see it as an opportunity and less than a risk. My assumption is that it will be tough in the beginning, but companies that know to do marketing and have a good marketing expertise, like established company, will get the opportunity of it because they will know how to navigate their resources. Because in the end of the day, we are talking about market forces, and the market must be balanced. So from one hand, you cannot have like super high marketing prices with very low result, and from the other hand, the competition is growing, because then it creates kind of inflation, and the prices must go down eventually, because there is a balance in each economy, and it's a semi-economy here. So what I do think is that companies that are doing preparation, as was described right now, and know and examine from now, as we see, we had a budget that we use it and examine it like there is, like it's already was implemented, and we got not so bad result. So I believe that companies that will know how to do it, basically big companies, because for small team it will be difficult. I think that it might be after like the friction and after the, let's say, the tectonic change, it might create an opportunity. But I might be wrong. So
yeah, hey, look, everyone's scrambling, right? We're just fortunate that Apple gave us a reprieve, right? In terms of it was supposed to already happen in September, and now I like it. They say not till next year. And we're like, January, February, March. I'm like, I don't know. So who knows? Who really knows, right? Maybe you guys might have some insights.
It'll be really interesting to observe. I mean, I think we can, of course, expect CPMs to come down. No longer will we be able to go after this, player that has a very, extensive history of making in-app purchases or whatever it is for our titles. So, we could expect the CPMs to go down, and then also perhaps the conversion rates, as well as, we have less information about who sort of historically converts, installs within our game. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting to observe sort of like what the trade-off is like between sort of CPM declines and conversion rate declines. Because, what will that mean to just the overall sort of like cost per acquisition?
I think it'd be good. It allows us to, look, I mean, you guys are closer, so maybe people were getting lazy with last click attribution. So we're like, okay, it's Facebook again, because, now, you think, I originally worked in broadcasts, right, before a long time ago, right? We used to, people did this measurement for a while, right, without any sort of, linkage, right? It was radio broadcast, right? So it's like they handed a book to people, gave them a diary, and asked people, what were you listening to, right? And then from that, they actually determine ad rates. So certainly not impossible. I think it will be interesting to see how people, like you brought up already, Pete, about probabilistic models and stuff too, and you take sort of some players, but that's something we're actually working right now. It's too early to kind of talk in detail about, but we're taking some of the predictive LTV algorithms that we have already, which we use for loads program pricing, and we're looking at, with just a couple of our key partners, how we can use that for helping user acquisition right now. And too early to talk about a productize and announce any results. It's still early, but sort of similar. I'm curious if any one of you guys is maybe doing something similar in terms of taking what from your own data science groups and your own kind of insights in your behavior around predictions around LTV and modeling that for UA. Vlad, looks like seeing some shaking of head from you.
Yeah, of course. This is absolutely critical to the business, and we spent the last few years building out the tech and the expertise and the team to use ML and AI both on the UA side and the product side. We rely on ML heavily to help us update our LTV models on the cohort level. To add some extra value to this conversation, I think could be useful to say that we are typically aiming for 95% precision on a 6-month model after 3 days. So we can tolerate 5% difference, which is fine by our standards, could be not good enough. Some people running higher budgets, but this is what we work with. Typically, we score better than that, but this is the tolerance we're accustomed to. And we do this on a cohort basis, so it's not, just males, females, that kind of stuff. It's quite granular, and this is something you can realistically do manually, which is why we're running this algorithms and all the time processing data and retraining the model as the game changes over time, because they always do. And on the product side, we are leaning heavily on ML as well to learn the spending patterns and how people respond to different sets of in-game goods, and trying to predict what kind of resources at what price point or what kind of discount or combo bonus they are more likely to accept or looking forward to. And this is something we've been rolling out very slowly, I must admit, because of the, not to say lack of trust, but careful attitude among the product guys, because to almost anyone who's not a data scientist, this kind of tech is a bit of a black box, because you cannot understand it within 10 seconds. There's some interesting ways of working with data, as you surely know. It can be rocket science at times. So the product owners in our company have been reluctant to go all in on ML powered in the purchases for these reasons. But where we roll out, we typically see 5, 10, 15% increase in the purchase conversion rates and average check. So it's totally worth it, but it's also kind of a double-edged sword, because you could easily cannibalize something else. You have to be extra careful.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm glad to hear you bring up pricing, Vlad. You know it's dear to my heart.
That's how I get on those panels, guys.
I know. Well, yeah. No, but also it's, important. It's like a small change in price can have really an outsized impact, right? And it is, when it's all outside of game design and kind of the core gameplay too, right? And that's the nice thing. But you're right, you have to be very kind of careful, and you need to get buy-in from the product team and everything else too, because it's very important. Barak, and I know you guys do a lot of stuff. You have a pretty big data science and AI team over there, too. Anything you'd like to add to this topic?
First of all, I can say that in the marketing side, so we have a dedicated data science team and machine learning team that's working only on auto bidding. So we can say that in the end of this year, we will be almost 95% of our marketing budget, or except of a few experiment will be managed by auto bidding system. And the next step is to do also the creative optimization, and everything like from A to Z will be automated completely, and we see a very good result from it. I can say that yes, the change that is coming is going to change the models, but again, we will find a way to do it. Regarding the LTV, as you asked before, so we have a predictions model that's starting from the UA point until the lifetime, and after, even in the acquisition part, we know to predict in very high probability what will be the conversion, what will be even the average check and things like that. And we are continuing with this model from the UA part until even like 90 and days and so on in the game. So I agreed on what was just said, that it's creating a little bit like you need to trust what is happening, and the ecosystem is very, very fragile. You can pull something here and then it will say change something here. So you need to be very, very careful, but from the other end, not to do too much, because then you will not be able to move. So it's kind of in the middle, and to be based also in intuition.
Are you also using a machine learning? So you mentioned UA, and I think it's, I know, I'm sure that, GMC is also looking at, this as well too, but, Barak, are you kind of doing this on the player journey at all? Are you changing live ops or your product at all based on some of those insights around your predictive algorithms too?
So yes, for sure. cannot say that we are doing it perfectly, but yes, it's depend of many things and let's say settings of the users, and based on it, you might see something else. Of course, if there is location and things like that, so of course that you will see something else. But even between users, you might see a different different user journey. And I can say that, in my opinion, this is like the future. That future is kind of the present. That each user will see like 50% or even more like personal a journey inside the application. Like this is the main goal, but of course it takes time to get there.
Okay, got it. Good. Yeah, one thing you mentioned earlier, Barak, and we talked about earlier, challenges was, it's all the money is coming in the thing. It's, this competition and everything like that too. So, and maybe switching this question over to you, Pete, too, because obviously, yes, it's a lot of more competitions, a lot more, and then you look at even the top 100, games, right? They don't seem to really change, very much really over time, too. And, but, frankly, we'd all like to be, top 500 is also a good place to be. What tips or advice do you have on launching, a new game in today's competitive landscape? Pete, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I could sum this up in maybe a few different bullets. So I think first it starts with kind of really getting a handle on sort of who your players are, knowing your players, what are their motivations, behavior, what are the demographics, really just, getting the best understanding that you can of who your core audiences are, I think is sort of like the, one of the first steps, at least on the marketing side. And then with that, if we're talking about launching a game, if we're talking about marketing a game, really knowing your channels, what their reach is like, targeting capabilities, what is the overlap sort of with the audiences that you've identified as key players in your game. And then sort of like tying that together, sort of applying your knowledge of your players and channels, and then thinking about the messaging and the creative. Right now, creative, I think, is one of the most powerful levers that a marketer has to sort of like speak to, to potential users, really just showcasing your value proposition, and sort of, with those three things, sort of knowing your players, the channels, and then sort of developing a creative strategy and messaging, I think are maybe a few ways to get started when thinking about kind of launching a game, at least from a user acquisition perspective.
Vlad, anything to add outside of user acquisition perspective, or any, is there anything else you can do other than, be clever with your UA strategy and maybe spend a lot of money?
The monetization side, but I already spoke about that.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so it's expensive to acquire. It's challenging. It's you got to spend a lot of efforts around to it too. So clearly want to keep people around as long as possible. So then maybe how do we not only retain some of these new users, and particularly I guess relevant now because COVID did bring us a lot of organics and a lot just new players into our game. So certainly want to keep them around as long as possible too. So any tips or suggestions around how to improve retention for a game in these tough times? Glad you're smiling. Or Barak, how about you? Yeah.
So I can say, because it's the one even $1 billion question. Yeah. So
Okay.
I can say that in my experience, this is the most difficult point, retention, for I think maybe every company. That the monetization is good, but then the retention is not so good, because you need to find the right balance. In the end of the day, if you will give everyone to play forever for free, your retention will be higher, but then you will not have money. So you need to kind of find the right balance there. And when you find it, I think that the main point here is innovation all the time. Mainly if you based on all the, not all, but let's a user base that not acquired frequently, but you are more 12 and 24 and even more months of lifetime. So I think it's to create innovation in the game, that the user will feel that, yes, they are playing the same game that they love, but they will see something else each time. And like every day they will see surprise in the game, so they must open, and if they didn't open the game today, they missed something. So to create this anticipation, this challenging, we are talking about monetization, and the one of the most important thing is economy for live ops, economy for activity, because from one hand, you don't want to do it, let's say too much easy, because it will not create a challenge. From the other hand, you don't want to like overkill with complexity. So it's all about to find the right balance, to innovate, and to create the feeling that each day, if you are not in the game, you missed something. And to create this feeling of a user, yes, it's more easy say and do, but this is I think the key for success here, and this will increase the retention for sure.
I think it's particularly challenging in a category like slots, where there's just a lot of really big players, and just as far as a category, maybe every category really, but I think slots would be challenging to differentiate, like innovate for another slots game. What other than your games, any other slots games you thought that did that really, really well, recently? So we don't have to get.
You ask a complicated question. So I will just say that from looking at the numbers, and you talk about top 100, you see a few new competitors in the field that perform extraordinary result, which coming along with a very innovative and great game. So I will not put names, but you can see it from the chart very, very strong that, the rising of a few competitors that really know what they are doing. So I think that even and for me, it's give a lot of belief in the, let's say, social casino gaming, because even after so many years, when people are talking about that this industry is like full and too many competitors, and it's not, let's say, a good environment to compete in, you see that coming from nowhere, competitors, and achieving an outstanding result. So I think that it's all about to create the right product, to do a great UA, and then to continue from there with monetization. But the base is a good product, and that we must not forget, because this is why the users are getting back.
Okay, well, once we've acquired, so yeah, Dan, you're right. It's $1 billion question, retention. So most important KPI, retention. Vlad, if nothing else to add to that, I'm kind of curious to get your opinion on maybe, because next step, monetization, right? So what, maybe any thoughts or insights in terms of some maybe recent monetization trends that you've seen or you're trying that you've, that you think are interesting?
Before we get there, I want to compliment Barak on the excellent answer. I would have said the same thing exactly. Lots and lots of desirable content every day. Simple, not easy. And I always tell people in the company and elsewhere that at the end of the day, we are not just game designers, marketers, producers, artists. We're entertainers. So we must entertain. And that's how we achieve loyalty eventually. And segueing into monetization, quite frankly, there isn't anything I would highlight as the dominant trend in monetization of the last quarter based on my experience and the companies I've been watching. I'm still really excited about the various forms of battle passes and event passes, kind of morphing with subscriptions and annuities, and we've been doing more of that recently. And I really like the concept of games having multiple reward tracks or progression systems depending on how much the players are willing to spend in the game. I think it's a fair model, and it's a very flexible model. And we've been kind of blurring the boundaries. Originally, a battle pass is something that's seasonal, right? So that's why it's called this way, because of where it originated. And we've been playing with the different ideas around, events, tying these passes to levels and combining these timers. Fascinating stuff. And also how they combine with subscriptions that for a while were perceived as just some incremental revenue, as they say. But now a combination of those different tools gives us a whole lot of flexibility. So I'm still really excited about it. I still think that there's a lot to explore in this area.
So you're saying a battle pass or a season pass is a way to be kind of like doing it, like you just said, a subscription. So it's a way of a subscription. Then elevates it to the next level because you get some extra rewards along the way just for playing the game. And so segmenting your players out that way.
Yeah, and I also really care about communication. I really believe in communicating with the players, not just giving them content, not just giving them gameplay mechanics, not just selling stuff, but being able to speak to the player, be transparent, upfront, and these models give us more flexibility than standard paywalls or some of the mechanics that shaped the industry in the earlier years. That's why I'm so excited about this, because ultimately we want to be as upfront and honest and transparent about the pricing, the contents of each in a purchase as we realistically can.
Good. And Pete, anything you want to add to about monetization trends too? So your season pass subscriptions, anything, or just.
Yeah, not too much to add there. When it comes to sort of the battle pass, we've seen some good success with that, but not too much else.
Yeah, and Barak, anything you want to add to that, or maybe just get your opinion on the subscription thing too?
I kind of agree, so I don't. I will not repeat.
Final question. So, so we're talking about subscriptions. I'm just curious to get your opinion. Look, none of you guys are all IAP oriented games, and certainly those are the kind of games that actually work really well with Battle Pass, stuff too. But unrelated, also part of the industry. I'll ask you, Brock. What are your thoughts on Apple Arcade? Right, so it's a subscription, so it's a premium game subscription where you pay a monthly fee, pretty low monthly fee, $4.99 a month, and you get a whole bunch of games.
So I think it's subscription. It's depend of the genre, but for sure, you can see it's not the different. It's an entertainment service as you are paying for, let's say Netflix or Spotify. Why not to pay for someone that will provide you games and you will enjoy from it? So I think it's a good point of growth for maturity companies and games, but the main let's say development work that you need to do prior to that is to craft a strong business model and to be able to understand before even you are selling it. And I think this is the gap in many companies, even before you are selling it, to understand what you are going to sell exactly and what will be the, what you will give in return for this subscription. Of course, it will not fit to all the games, because if you are kind of an excitement games and it's like progress, so then, okay, what exactly? We are selling kind of, let's say, exclusive content, but to play, let's say, endless game and with a monthly fee, it's depend on the genre. I believe it will grow because there is much potential in this. Just need to write, again, to the business model and the strategy of the business need to be correlate to this point. And by the way, exactly the other point from monetization, because the moment you convert this user, you just need to continue giving him a good content, and then there is a contradiction between these 2 points. So from one hand, they have monetization, from other hand, the content, and you need to find the balance and to understand the strategy of the company, I see.
Makes sense. Any predictions on the future of monetization from anyone, or is it just more of the same at this point? You want to throw out any sort of bold predictions, at this point? Or I can have one last final question. All right, wrapping up. So let's look. We're coming up to the end of the time here, I think, I know too. So if there's any parting thoughts and things that we did from the questions we had a good dialogue on everything from how you acquire players to how you retain them, get them sticking around longer, and certainly then how you monetize them. Any final thoughts to share with us, Brock, before we close out?
I can add to a question that we're asking in the middle of the session regarding launching a new game. And I think it's kind of we are now in a process of launching 2.5, let's say 3 new games. And I think it's kind of an art work to know exactly what to do and when to do, because as you are giving more risk, many companies, there is 2, let's say, main calls when we are talking about it. The one side said, start with very high UA budget, be on top of the organic, get many organic, jump to the top, create a CAC that, let's say, dramatically lower than the CPI, and release a game as a boom, and after a few months to decrease the UA and stabilize on some point. And of course, we see the positive side. The negative side is, of course, the risk, and not many companies can afford themselves to, let's say, invest few millions in advance without initial KPIs. The other, let's say, option is to start slow and safe, but of course that it will take you more time. It might cost you more money because the CPI and the CAC are kind of equals, but you are much more safer. So I think that if you are talking about medium and small companies, even if you have a nice EBITDA and a nice budget, to find the right balance between the safety and the risk that you might take in order to catch some whales and to increase your option to convert user and to get organic. So I think this is the kind of a challenge, and kind of to find this right balance. This is a unique, let's say, experience, especially for new teams and new companies in the zone. So
good point. Any other?
To add to that, I think it's a very useful mental exercise to take yourself and your business outside the gaming context for a moment and think of launching some product in some market. And then you are thinking, well, there are many models. I could go about it in many ways, depending on my cash flow requirements, cost of capital, size of the available capital, the product, how ready it is, what's the risk tolerance of the business behind it, and so many factors coming into play. And then bring it back into the context of gaming and think about all the different opportunities you have, because we all read stories about game launches, but launch has become something you can define for yourself. We used to live by a specific book 7, 8, 9 years ago, when you had to have this explosive first week, stabilize at the top of the charts. We used to have a game that stayed at number 1 in its category by downloads for 16 months straight without any UA spend, just by virtue of being early to the market, having this nice spike of downloads initially. And that used to be how we launch games. But then as the industry matures, it becomes way more complex, and there are so many ways you could go about this. So I think that was an excellent point.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the games are almost always like a work in progress, and you'll see it. Like a game could be, in developed, it could have launched, a year ago, and doesn't start climbing up the top grossing chart until 12, 18 months after it first released. So just the iteration, games are always ongoing, the development's always ongoing, and it might take some time before something is really sticking and the revenue is really stacking. So yeah, I agree. Those are good thoughts.
No, it's a good point. It's a great way to wrap up this conversation too, because that is sort of the heart of free-to-play mobile gaming, right? Is constantly iterating and building onto investing, live ops, marketing, etc. too. So gentlemen, if nothing else you want to add, I want to thank you all for your time. Great insights that sharing with us just now. Thank you very much.